Now, for our next panel discussion, we have an experienced group of CPAs. They're going to break down how diversification can lead to increased profit margins and increased client satisfaction. The best part is they're doing it all without adding a whole lot of extra work to their already packed schedules. Please welcome the panelists and our moderator to the session, Rhonda Kitch, CEO of the Equality First Consultants, Ryan Foncannon, Managing Partner at S.W.A.N Virtual Family Office, Scott Curley, CEO of FinishLine Tax Solutions, LLC, Jake Mellor, CEO of Alpha Mark Capital, and they will take us through the next session on panel discussion, the power of diversification, how CPAs can broaden their client base. Thank you.
We're going to be a real pain because it's been a long day and all of us are a little bit tired, everything else, but we're going to ask that the, 17 or so people here in the room, that you guys all come up to the front. I know that a few of you have bags. I know a few of you have friends items and coffee and all this other stuff, but we're going to actually force you to interact a little bit, which is painful, I know. But if you don't mind, just please come up to the first 2 or 3 rows. I'd really, really appreciate it. We have a mic actually right here in the center, and I'm going to ask that a couple of you use it as we go about teaching and instructing and sharing some of these little golden nuggets that we have with you today. So if the next group that, by the way, I'm on the panel with you guys, if you don't mind also coming up, and everybody else, if we wouldn't just all kind of conglomerate here in the middle, it's going to make it look better for the pictures as well as for us participating with each other. The reason I say that and the reason I'm making you do that is because the 3 of us here are subject matter experts, as well as we are strategists. And in order for strategy to really work, we need, obviously, to have implementation, but also participation from the people that we work with. On a day-to-day, what does life look like for us? We're going to share a little bit of that with you guys. But first and foremost, I'd like perhaps a little bit of background and knowledge from my fellow panelists so that we can kind of understand how what we do is relevant to everybody here in the room. I was fortunate enough, and I won't say that it was necessarily by history, background, or experience, but I was chosen as an individual to be the back office for a large association of CPA firm owners. What does it mean to be the back office? Essentially, when these CPA firm owners that paid large dues in their subscription to this association, when they had questions that they and their offices did not have answers to, I had to figure it out. I had to become the solution guy. So for a year or so, I was fed by the fire hose with strategies from across the United States, some of which were terrible strategies, some of which were wonderful. And I had to come up with documentation, I had to come up with source evidence, and I had to come up with details of why these CPA firm owners should or should not allow their clients to participate in these strategies. And that was exhausting, but it was fantastic because in that period of time I was able to learn, my goodness, over 423 different strategies and when they work and when they don't. Now, what are strategies? I oftentimes say that money has 2 sides of the same coin. The side that you're taxed on, as well as the side that you get your return or your interest or your earnings from. Here with us today, we have Ryan and we have Scott. Now, Ryan, as director of S.W.A.N, don't let me say too much, but he helps people in a roundabout way with strategies. Scott, you help people specifically when there are issues and problems that need to be resolved with the IRS. Now, I want today's session to be story related or story given. I think that people relate. Obviously, we're going to redact names and everything like that, but we're going to share examples of when it's relevant and how, with what we do for people, we help them save more on taxes so that they can invest more in their business and overall increase their net worth. Now, Scott, if we can start with you, and then Ryan. Scott, will you tell us a little bit more about maybe some of the highlights of this year? The highlights so that with this background, we can then jump into the topic of how the CPA firm owners here in the room, as well as in the audience and those that are viewing this afterwards, will know how they can increase their overall revenue without necessarily increasing their overall workload.
Sure. So my name is Scott Curley, by the way. I'm CEO and one of the founders of a company called FinishLine Tax Solutions. We're a full-service tax resolutions firm. We help people who have problems with the IRS. You know, if you owe over $10,000 to the IRS, you saw those commercials, right? So I won't get into the diversification component because my thought on diversification may be different than what the topic and conversation may be. My thought was about people diversification. I don't have letters behind my name, right? So I'm not a CPA, so I'm kind of in over my head possibly. I'm just an old country boy who owns the company, right? I have smart people that work for me though. I may have deviated a little bit, but
No, I think you said something incredibly important, that you have the people with the credentials working for you.
Absolutely.
And not all of the CPA firms out there have all of the credentials necessary to provide all of the services that their clients need. Mm-hmm. So I think you touched on a really important point, that if your firm doesn't offer the entire menu of services in-house, mm-hmm. it doesn't mean that they can't create strategic alliances with those subject matter experts so that their clients in-house can have that service by a trusted source that you and your office vet.
This is true, you know, but first of all, yes, that's absolutely true, no question about it. And I'm a firm believer in understanding and acknowledging my own limitations. Like I said, I'm more of a conceptualist. I know I look at big things with broad strokes and I see a big picture, but I'm not really good in the details. But I think what's important is to surround ourselves with folks who can fill in those holes and fill in those blanks. You know, there are a lot of people that work in my company that are way smarter than I am, and I'll be the first to acknowledge and admit that. But at the same, at the same time, it takes that group for the parts to become a whole, I guess you should say. And so that's a big part of what's helped us, and I think super important as far as, you know, just having a full rounded realm of rounded group of people around you, you know, and folks who can challenge, you know, and not challenge me, and where we can challenge each other, right?
You know, I think you made me think of the age-old idiom of teamwork makes the dream work.
Makes the dream work, yeah.
And there's no I in team.
Right.
And so with a ton of humility, you're talking about how you're able to identify the right people for the job for the client, even if you don't have all the information yourself.
And most of the time I don't. That's a fact. Like I said, I'm not a practitioner. I get asked, you know, because our firm, and I say with humility, but I'm proud of it. We were acknowledged as being one of the fastest growing companies in the country by Inc. magazine this past year. We ranked 1304. And we started with $2,000 in a dream, you know. But what helped us to get to that point, and this is not about Scott, okay, I'm just giving a real quick example, was the fact that Brian and I, my business partner, were cognizant and aware and very self-aware of our own limitations, you know, and understanding that in order for us to get to where we want to be and beyond, it's going to take something bigger and folks who know what we don't know, and for us to be humble enough to acknowledge and be okay with that, you know.
So just real fast to recap, what was this award or recognition that you guys received this year?
We got recognized by Inc. magazine this year as being in the Inc. 5000. I was part of the Inc. 5000 list. So
that's a pretty awesome, amazing award to receive.
Mm-hmm.
And you just told us that you don't oftentimes have all the solutions yourself.
Usually don't.
But all the clients still come to you, right? And your firm was recognized as one of the fastest growing in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And so in all of this humility, you're definitely helping the clients with what they need.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's the whole reason that we got into that. And Inc. wrote a story about us in the winter edition that's out right now. And one of the things that we mentioned in that article is that we didn't get into it in the business to get rich. We knew that if we did the right thing, that the money would come.
I want to identify this as a growing trend within the market today. A lot of people are going to their CPA, their financial advisor, their attorney, And they don't expect this person to know everything or to be able to do all of it.
Right.
But they have the expectation that this person will help quarterback those services.
Absolutely.
That this person in humility will identify what they do, what they don't do, and who does it better and who should be brought in.
I love that you keep saying humility, because that's our mantra. I mean, the moment, and I've told, Ryan and I have mentioned this before, and I don't want to monopolize our time, of course, but the moment that we lose, any of us, we lose our humility is the moment that we start to realize our own demise. I think that's super important. The more successful and more forward, the more that we achieve, I think it's so important to remain humble and grounded in that process.
Perfect. Now, Scott, we're going to switch over to Ryan here
Please.
for just a second. Before we do Ryan,
Oh yeah, we're not business partners. I would work with him, but yeah, we're not business partners.
a different Ryan, right? Yeah. Anyway,
Absolutely.
yes, maybe after this show. One of the items that I like to make a comparison with right now. How many people out there in the audience have ever tried to lose a few pounds? Okay, we've got a few people. Some people who are amazingly trim and never needed to lose any weight, and the rest of us, right? In our weight loss programs that we've participated in, how many of us have just done the daily do-it-yourself, step on the scale, how am I doing today? Step off of the scale, and then rinse and repeat tomorrow, and then step off the scale? I mean, we've done that, right? I mean, oftentimes that's one little piece of a bigger plan, or sometimes that's all we do. How many of us have actually paid for like a gym membership? How many of us have like taken supplements? How many of us have done something more? Or let's take it to the extreme. How many of us have hired a personal trainer and a nutritionist? Anybody out there? Okay, we've got some people who are serious about their health. This is good. I want to compare that to strategic planning. All right? CPAs and tax preparers oftentimes are incredibly good at filing returns. The client in today's environment is looking for something more. That is not bad if what you do in your practice is file returns. That is not bad. But you need to be bringing in somebody like a Ryan or somebody like a Scott, those subject matter experts, and because clients are looking for more than just that scale that they can buy at Walmart. They're looking for that nutritionist, they're looking for that personal trainer, they're looking for recommendations of what to intake in their diet, as well as activities during the day of what they should be doing. And when they are stepping on the scale, what is it that they should be looking for? What does that mean, right? If you're serious about it, which today's client, today's consumer, is more and more serious than ever before about their finances. And they're looking to the CPA, they're looking to, if we go way back, maybe 2 decades, Time Magazine came out, and who is the most trusted advisor for a client?
CPA.
It's their CPA, it's their accountant. Could even be their bookkeeper. It's the person that literally, it's almost like going to the doctor's office and they drop their drawers with no shame, willing to bear it all, number-wise, and find out how they can do better. Right? But some of our accountants and our accounting firm owners maybe feel inadequate. Maybe feel like, well, they know that they can't offer everything in-house. And my encouragement to them is that they create these strategic alliances so that somebody like a Ryan can step in, or a Scott, or another subject matter expert who have the tools for planning, who have the tools for everything that your client needs. But what does it take on behalf of the account? It takes a little bit of due diligence. If you're going to recommend your client to somebody, you need to get to know them. Perhaps need to use them yourself to understand what you're going to be offering your clients outside of your firm. And this is how you are able to increase your revenue, increase your client overall satisfaction, increase the expectations and the satisfaction of these expectations being met by your clients without incredibly increasing your workload. You do have to invest a little bit of time and effort in the beginning. But Ryan, can you take us on a little walkthrough of what a relationship like that looks like, some of the referral partners that you have, how that works, and maybe what the outcomes have been recently in this year?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot. I'm the managing partner of a virtual family office. That's a little bit newer term. I don't know if anybody's read the book Who Not How, but I think that's kind of like what we're talking about. We're trying to bring in people who, not trying to figure out how, because the how takes much, much longer to learn. Now, I'm not saying you don't need to do the due diligence, but the how, you could spend years, and a lot of people that are business owners, especially tax pros or CPAs, are so bogged down with just the compliance work that they're doing, the bookkeeping, the financials, everything like that. So something that we do is we have access to like 70 plus probably specialists, the who's. So we're basically like a who with a team of who's that we bring on as an as-needed basis, depending on what the situation is. And it could be a real estate thing. It could be someone selling a business and they need some advice on in terms of the law, but also how am I going to mitigate the taxes to myself and my family? So a lot of times we'll work with a lot of tax pros, and I'll say that we're kind of like an add-on virtual family office, but tax pros know, as like you said earlier about in terms, tax pros understand it as like, okay, we're kind of like the back office help to them to make them look bigger on an individual or even on their tax practice and everything. So they look like the star of the show. So it's not necessarily like the old referral model where you refer it out and then maybe you might get something reciprocated. This is more of a relationship in terms of getting to know them better. And it's also about educating them about the different strategies that we use. And it's also about just learning more about their clients and not being transactional, because I think from our perspective is we like to take a look at the total picture. We want to see the business return if there is one. We want to see the 1040, the personal joint return. We want to see sometimes net worth can open up some more doors to other strategies. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more tomorrow and everything. But yeah, there's a lot of different things that need to be taken into effect. And even myself, I can't know everything, but it's having the access to people that do know everything in that particular area. Like you were saying, the subject matter experts is having a team of subject matter experts on your team that you have access to. Because I think the big thing is having access to people and knowing how to have the best outcomes for clients. Most recently, I had one I worked on just a couple of days ago, and I probably showed him 9 high-impact tax strategies. Some were on the business side, some were on the personal, but it allowed them to decide which ones they wanted to do. So it's like, okay, I like that one, I like that one. Let's park that, maybe do that in 2023. So I think people really, really like options and not just being transactional. And it's like, hey, let's just focus on this one thing. When you take a step back, you can actually look at the total picture, and there's more opportunities that maybe come to the table. That's kind of like a Swiss Army knife. I'd like to say that particular strategy can cover multiple things, that if you just went to 5 different people, you would have 5 different strategies instead of using just one to cover that one type of situation. So there's different things.
So Ryan,
absolutely.
Let me put this into context a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm going to role play.
All right.
All right. So I am a bookkeeper.
Yeah.
My clients love me. I have 500 of them and a little team that works with me that helps me, but I'm kind of like the face.
Yeah.
So all of my clients talk to me and they love me and they trust me. I'm afraid to introduce them to you.
Yep.
But I know that there's things that you have that I don't.
Yep.
I've heard about people who hire their kids and don't pay any taxes. I've heard about people who put money away for a rainy day into their own insurance company. How is that possible? I don't know, but you know. Mm-hmm. And I've heard about all of these owner-only retirement plans, and I've heard of all these things, but you know what? I'm really good at just reconciling. My clients need what you have. Mm-hmm. So now I'm going to test the waters. I'm going to introduce a couple of them to you.
Okay.
And the nice thing is, this guy doesn't stop talking about me to my clients. In the sense that, you know what? This isn't an outside referral where my clients go outside and they get marketed other things or anything like that. This guy is going to talk me up and my services and always refer everything back to me, while at the same time offering his services.
Yep.
Maybe explain how that relationship works a little.
Yep. That is a great example. I actually had something that very similar recently. the big thing that we do also is education. And it's not just education for the client, but it's education for the tax professional. And the thing that we always like to do is, yes, we'll do a diagnostic of the client situation and see what's possible. We usually do some vetting on the front side to even make sure that they're even going to qualify for some of the stuff. So what's the point of having a conversation if they don't qualify for certain types of strategies? The thing that I think that we like to do is we always go back to the tax pro and let them have the green light to a particular strategy before we even bring it to the client. And I think that makes it a lot different than the basic referral model, because usually it's the tax pro isn't involved in a lot of cases, and they're kind of brought into the picture on the back end and not on the front end. So it's a little bit different situation. So unless the tax pro gives it the green light, then we don't meet with the client.
So an experience I had this week, because Ryan and I were very similar, had a CPA who we've trained on what is appropriate, what is eligible, as you've mentioned, and they know and understand more or less what clients they should introduce for what things. And typically they jump on for the first 10 minutes of the phone call or the Zoom call. We like to do the face-to-face, even if it's virtual. And the introduction is made, the CPA or the accountant nods their head at the, saying, hey, we know and understand the ins and outs of this client, and we feel like this is a comfortable and a good recommendation to make. And then, of course, as subject matter experts, or we bring members of our team that are appropriate onto the call, they can see that these higher level strategies that save much bigger dollars, where essentially we're moving money from column A to column B all the way down to column Z, we're getting a deduction, a deferral, or an exemption, that it does take a team to make this work. And that all this team was brought to you by Mr. and Mrs. CPA, accountant, bookkeeper, whoever, and that we are an extension of them. And of course, I want to talk about something very important, Scott. There has been a pandemic. And with the pandemic, the IRS, how many IRS agents actually have an email address? Like maybe 1%? And where do they receive all of their correspondence? Like kind of like dinosaur or archaic, like fax machines? And though the IRS was ordered to work from home for an extended period of time, where are their fax machines located?
At the IRS office.
Into the mic, right there.
Oh, I'm sorry. They're at the office, but they're at home.
At the office, but they're working from home. And since the pandemic ended, how many of the IRS agents have actually returned to the office?
So, well, first of all, you know what? Give me 30 seconds. I need to say, you have saved me today. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to admit to something. I am not a subject expert on this. So when they say, I think you know that, and you're kind of helping me through this, and I want to thank you, man. I own a litigation firm, tax litigation. I can't tell you the difference between a W-2 and a W-9, man. So I'll tell you that now. So what you guys are talking, y'all are talking so far over my head, and I'm just going to be honest with you guys and let you know that, all right? So when they said diversification, I thought they were talking about cultural diversification, right, in the workforce, and why that's important, because that is important. Right. So thank you for that. So I will stay in my lane. I'll answer that question because I can, but I am not going to get involved in the rest of this conversation about these codes and all that stuff that y'all brainiacs are talking about, okay? Because you're way over my head. So
you can just say nerds, it's fine.
Nerds is fine. So.
Well, actually, Scott, I'm going to argue with you for just a moment because I feel like you are incredibly relevant to the discussion in the sense that I feel with the reduction in IRS agents and with the reduction of the IRS agents who actually show up to the office and with the huge hiring that they're trying to do, that they're failing at doing right now, I believe that more and more there's going to be aggressive tactics by the government simply because they are overworked, understaffed, and way behind, right? So anybody who is facing those problems, there's a moment of desperation where they start cutting corners, meaning that there's usually a 7-step process that they have in their manual, what have you, to get information from clients when there's something vague or there's red flags or something like that. They send out a notice letter What I've seen recently, Scott, is that they've been skipping some of the first 3 or 4 notice letters, and that they're going straight to settlement letters. So instead of, please provide me proof and evidence, they're just saying, hey, we think that what you're doing is wrong. Please settle, send us this amount of money. And sadly, there's a lot of clients. I just spoke to one yesterday who sent in a check of like 24 grand, didn't need to do it. Didn't need to do it.
Right.
They needed somebody like you guys to provide some kind of resolution. This settlement letter does not necessarily mean that you've actually done something wrong. It just means that you have to prove that you didn't.
Well, when you're dealing with at least from our angle, when we're representing our clients who have these matters and these tax problems, and especially considering the fact that they usually got into those predicaments by not filing or under withholding and things like that, then the IRS, you're guilty until proven innocent. You know, the IRS is not going to train you and teach you on how to resolve your own matter to your benefit. Their job is to collect tax dollars by any means legally necessary. And especially through this pandemic situation, there have been some really profound and radical changes within the IRS that I'm not going to steal my own thunder. That's going to be a little bit about what we talk about tomorrow.
Just as a little teaser.
A little teaser is the aggressive nature. The IRS has kind of been more, okay, I'll say this. There's an old saying that there's only 2 things guaranteed in life, death and taxes. Well, believe it or not, that was not necessarily true for the first time in this country's history over the past 2 years. What I mean is that the IRS, for the first time in its history, has stopped or pulled back on collections by about 80%. So people who had or have tax problems, they were not being nearly as aggressively pursued. Now, here's I'll give you the very short on this, not to take too much, I'll take 30 seconds. That the 87,000 new agents, that's real, that's over a 10-year period, but the $80 billion that's been allocated for funding to the IRS is being done solely to recoup the monies that were just given away through the pandemic, the PPP loans and things like that. And it's going to be and the new agents are going to be, guess who? Kids out of college who are full of energy and want to do nothing but make a name for themselves. And they're going to be replacing the old folks, that have been there for 30 something years. So for anyone who has tax issues and that you have them, be prepared for an extremely aggressive IRS in the next coming years.
And I think that's the message that we just want to get out there. Not that the IRS is bad or anything like that. Historically, they've been really good to work with, much better than some of the states. However, times are changing. The workforce is being replenished with younger blood, people excited to make a name for themselves, just as you mentioned.
Full of energy.
And I would view them just, my own lenses as more of a collection agency than anything else.
Well, they are. It's the largest collection agency in the world.
Okay. So the need for reaching out to a personal trainer rather than just stepping on the scale and doing it all yourself has increased dramatically for a number of different reasons. And with that, just because, we're falling a little bit behind on time, we have the audience nice and close, I'd love for somebody to have a question. And so feel free to come over to the mic. We have a mic in the middle. Actually, there was a mic. If you want my mic, I'll come out to the audience and hand it to you.
We have one for it.
Do we have a question? All right, if we don't, I'm going to pick on somebody. Oh, we do have a question. Removing the mask.
Have you seen an increase in tax litigation filings? Is there something like any trends that you're seeing related to that?
Tax evasion?
Tax litigation.
Tax litigation trends.
I can answer. You want me to answer? The question is, are we seeing an increase in tax litigation filing? What was the last part of that? No, we've seen a decrease over the past few years because when the IRS is not sending out aggressive notices as they typically do, and the reason again is because they've been giving the citizens of this country a bit of a break, then people don't feel as motivated and they don't feel that it's as important or as necessary to respond or to deal with those matters. So because of that, it's actually been a bit of a lull for the past 2 years.
Now, where the pendulum swings one way,
it swings another.
So what is the expectation for the future? Is that as they do replenish, so little lesser known fact, when the IRS offices were ordered to work from home during the pandemic, only about 50% of those employees have actually returned to the offices.
Right.
Some of them are still getting paid from home, but where do all the correspondence go? It goes to the office. So they are behind on a ton of work,
Absolutely.
and they may never actually catch up.
That's a different story.
Yes, and
They're perpetually behind.
which, you know, their normal process that they go through, they're skipping steps, they're rounding corners. It's just not a very happy place to work right now. With all of that being said, we need to be more on our game. Clients need to be documenting everything that they're doing much better now today than ever before, because in 2 years and 11 months, whatever, you might get not just a notice letter like in the past, it might be a settlement letter that now the burden of proof is on you to prove, which is the importance behind everything that we're talking about. Reach out to all those subject matter experts to collaborate with your accountant, which, by the way, when you implement higher level strategies, it usually increases the work of the bookkeeper, accountant, CPA. If you have a good,
If they have that at all too, because we won't work with somebody that doesn't have their books in order with an actual bookkeeper or an actual tax pro. I think that's where you probably get a lot of work from people that are doing their own taxes or even their own bookkeeping. And
but you love them, but you usually
We love them because they need our help, and we can help them. You know, the good news with the IRS, there's good news in all of this. The good news is that the IRS is very predictable. The bad news is that the IRS is very predictable. You know, and that's something that we tell all of our clients. They can do many things, but they cannot discriminate. They do not bluff. They do what they say they're going to do, and they typically do what they say they're going to do when they say they're going to do it, because it goes through what's called an ACS, Automated Collection Systems. The operative word is automated. So there are millions and millions of people that have these issues. There are not enough people that work in the IRS to handle these matters individually. So they have a computer system that generates the directives, per se. So like I said, if you know you have an issue, then address it so that it can be handled on your own terms, as opposed to the IRS handling it on theirs.
Okay, very good. Let's see, do we have time to share 2 stories real fast? Nobody's telling me. Oh, they're saying that you need to ask me those 2 stories after. All right, very good. Well, I want to thank everyone for being here, for participating. Thank you for that question.
Thank you.
Mysterious man with a mask in the back. And appreciate everybody, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you for saving me.